All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Hawk Droppings. I'm your host, Hawk. And this week's guest is the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, Tennessee Brando. Welcome, brother.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, I mean, I lead a pretty insulated life out here in the Bay Area when it comes to having to interact with Republicans and Trump supporters, meaning that I don't have to do those things. We don't have very many of them around here. But you're in Tennessee, and your politics are obviously pretty far on the left, relatively speaking, to where you live. Mm-hmm. And it's just it's always a fascinating thing for me to talk to folks, you know, who are basically a blue dot living in a red state.
Yeah.
So how's the election look on the ground where you live?
Well, you know, I'm not going to sit here and think that, you know, Tennessee's going to be turning blue anytime soon. We're definitely a blood red state. And it is, you know, I visited back last March, April there in California, and we got to meet and hang out. And when we were sitting in the bar together and you were talking politics as loud as you were talking, I was sitting there in the back. I was sitting there. If you'll notice, I started looking over my shoulder because I was like, wait, you know, because had you done that in a bar back home, it would have been a completely different reaction to the people around us. So yeah, it's, you know, we're surrounded here, but there are a lot of good people here, and there's a whole lot of more blue dots than people realize. I think a lot of them are simply afraid to speak up. I think a lot of them are kind of afraid to put the signs in their yard, although we saw a few. I think a lot of people fear putting signs in their yard or being too outspoken about it. But we have, you know, the Tennessee three here. We had Gloria Johnson, and she's running against Marsha Blackburn for Senate. We have Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. They're all great voices. And we're starting to see a little bit of a movement starting here, people that are just so tired of the rhetoric. And what I tell people that aren't from Tennessee is if you've read or studied anything about Project 2025 and you want to know what it's about, just look at Tennessee. It's already on display here. And that is what would be around the country if it was to ever be implemented.
You just rattled off like the first 4 line items that I have on my notes. Well, yeah, I mean, let's start with talking about, I mean, so the Tennessee three, for people who are unfamiliar, they were 3 state legislatures. One is a white woman who's on a Democrat, and 2 young black men who are Democrats. And I think it was during a debate over a gun bill. They raised a bit of a ruckus, and the 2 young black men got expelled. Yeah. Not just removed from the room, they got expelled from the Tennessee State House by Republicans. They're back in now, correct?
Yeah, they are.
So when that was happening, that was the first time that I had ever started learning about or done some reading about the current iteration of Tennessee state government and the state legislature, very heavily dominated by Republicans, incredibly gerrymandered, and I just remember at the time thinking like, oh, this is what they're talking about when they talk about, you know, having an authoritarian governing body. They're doing that now in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time that I realized, like, with congressional seats in Tennessee, I looked at how they had split up the city of Nashville, which is obviously a pretty blue city.
Yeah.
How they had split it up so that it was like little pieces of it in these districts that just went out like a pizza, like pieces of pizza. So you'd have a little bit of Nashville with all of these Republicans, and they just completely diluted every Democratic vote in the entire city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
man, yeah. The things they've done here, man, is outrageous. I had Gloria Johnson on my podcast, and the things that they've done to her. They rezoned where she lived. They've tried everything in the under the sun to get to her, and you know, she has some problems with her knee, so she has to use a scooter a lot of times where she goes. So they literally gave her an office upstairs, and then suddenly said the elevator was out of order. To make it, yeah, I mean, I'm talking, man. It is absolutely crazy here the way that they've been treated, but they've been good and and stood up to things. And yeah, the reason they busted out the bullhorn, the megaphone that day, is because they literally shut their microphones off. And like Justin Jones said, he said we wanted the people that were there in the chamber to know we were trying to talk for them. And so yeah, it's been absolutely it's crazy here at times. But like I said, I do feel like we've got a lot of people who are tired of it, and there are people starting to speak up at least.
Well, and I think one thing that I say about Republicans all the time, either at the state level or at the national level, is they always overreach. Mm-hmm. They always just go too far, and end up pushing, reasonable people who otherwise would have stayed quiet. They just push them and push them and push them to a point where people stand up and start saying, okay, that's too much.
Yeah,
that's too much. We need to start bringing things back in the other direction. And but you referenced Project 2025, and I heard some people at the time, when the Tennessee 3 stuff was going on, I think that was back when most people didn't have any idea what Project 2025 was. And I like to brag a little bit. The very first podcast episode that I recorded last December was about Project 2025. I spent 50 minutes talking about it, and nobody knew what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah.
But then, I think seeing things like what's happened with the Tennessee state legislature has just kind of fueled people's curiosity to learn what these people are actually planning.
Yeah. I think something too, like you said, a whole lot of people weren't talking about it, and there was content creators that were, and it was almost like this underground thing that people were talking about, not a lot. It wasn't really something that was making it into the mainstream. But then I noticed it started to kind of pick up steam, and I heard more people talking about it. I even heard the mainstream media start to reference it more, and it caused people to look at it. And then when they look at it, even some hardcore, Republicans in my part of the world was looking at that once they really dug into it, going, wait a minute, we didn't think this is what, I don't think they realized. I think that as long as people like me and you were talking about it, they just thought, oh, that's just too liberals. That's just some boogeyman they're trying to create. But once they dug in and started seeing it for what it was, I think it's starting to wake people up to it.
Well, one thing that I saw, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Project 2025 over the last 9 or 10 months, and like over the last 3 or 4 months, it's become pretty clear that Trump has been really going after the votes of men under 30, and specifically white men under 30. And two of the things in Project 2025 that they want to do is ban video games and ban pornography, and put in place criminal sanctions for the production, distribution, or consumption of pornography.
Yeah.
And then I saw there was a group of like 10 or 15 adult film actors who got together and raised a bunch of money and started running some ads.
Yeah.
Running ads on gaming sites and on YouTube and on some of the porn sites that are like, here's what they're going to do, guys.
Yeah.
It's just, so did you grow up in Tennessee?
I'm right on the state line of Kentucky and Virginia, so I'm right on the tri-state, and I actually was born. I was actually born here in Tennessee, and then I was raised up over on the Kentucky side, and then I moved back to Tennessee once I got out of school. So it's all home to me. It's like I could be in all three states in like 10 minutes.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, I've kind of got the trifecta here.
Yeah, and I mean, so were your politics always liberal, or did you ever used to be a Republican?
No, I've pretty much always been liberal. I grew up in a home, my mom was a Democrat. My dad voted Republican because his family did for the longest time. And he kind of stayed quiet about politics for growing up. My mom talked it a lot, and on my mom's side of the family, they always talked it. That's why I say a lot of times in my videos, we've always talked it in my house. Then my mom's mother was a Democrat. So, and then I had an uncle on my mom's side were Democrats. So I grew up with that. And then my dad, like I think it's Clinton's second term, my dad finally came out and admitted that he had voted for Clinton the first time and was going to the second time. And it was honestly, man, when he did that, it was kind of like it took I don't think his family's still over it. There's still a lot of them that's like, they think my mom got to him and I guess poisoned his brain or whatever. But so no, I've got progressive parents, and I've just, I've always leaned this way. I've always voted straight ticket Democrat. Of course, in local elections, it's all Republicans around here. So I'm sure the magistrate and the mayors around here are Republicans. Sure. I've voted that way. But in all the main elections, I've always voted Democrat.
Yeah, it's just, because I grew up pretty much in rural Ohio. But, during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Ohio was at least a swing state back then. Mm-hmm. We had Democratic governors at times. We had Democratic senators at times. The Democratic Party was always very strong in Ohio. I left Ohio in 2002, and since then, it's just kind of turned into Alabama. It's like,
yeah,
it's so red, it's insane. And the state GOP and the state house in Ohio has been doing a lot of the things that I saw the state GOP doing in Tennessee with government. And I guess in 2022 there was an abortion referendum on the ballot in Ohio, and it passed pretty close to like 60-40. And, and Republicans in the state house have been doing everything they can to, overturn that or neuter that and take away all of its impact in spite of how people voted, including a majority of Republicans in that state. And again, I think that just kind of feeds into the thing that I always say, that they just always overreach. They always overreach. They always just go too far with this shit. And it's like, over the last 3 or 4 years, obviously we've heard a lot about the things that Rick DeSantis has been doing, or Ron DeSantis, whatever the hell his name is, in Florida as governor, with his Republican supermajorities in the state house, and all that culture war stuff. Is that stuff going on in Tennessee as well? Like banning books and the "Don't Say Gay" stuff, anything like that?
Oh yeah, man. We definitely have a whole lot of that here. Like you said, and they're just always overreaching here. It's amazing how far they'll go to overreach and just how blatant they do it. But we have Governor Bill Lee here, and I jokingly say he's kind of like your Dollar General Trump, or at least he's trying to be. He's like your knockout. It's like, and there's been so much overreach here, and it's really, like I said, if you want to see Project 2025 in action, it's right here already for us.
It's like how much of an influence in Tennessee, does religion play? How hand in hand are like religion and the Republican Party in Tennessee?
Oh man, it is hand in hand, and I've thought so much about this very subject. I'm glad you brought it up. I could actually probably write a book about it, honestly, because man, in this part of the world, you're brought up, and luckily I wasn't, but you're brought up to believe that Democrats are just of the devil, and the preachers preach politics right from the pulpit. I don't really know of a church. That's why my mom, as a Democrat's never really been able to go to church around here, because everywhere she goes, she's made to feel unwelcome, or if she shows up for church service, just to be there to fellowship with people, the minute they catch wind she's a Democrat, then she's not made welcome anymore. And it's like, it plays right into it, man. It's like they preach it from the pulpit, pretty much unapologetically, and you're just brought up to believe that Democrats are evil, that they're baby killers, and that they're immoral, and that they're coming for your guns. That's another big one. They've been saying for years here, the Democrats are going to take your guns away. And people in my part of the world, they grow up, they're took to church, they're taught to believe in God, they go hunting with their grandpas and their dads, and they shoot guns, and they've got family members who are veterans, and they're taught to be patriotic and have respect for the flag. And then every Sunday, their minister's saying that the Democrats hate the flag, the Democrats hate the military, the Democrats hate, them for having their religion. And so it's, I've talked to people in my part of the world, man, and showed them and explained to them some of the things that Trump's doing, and they'll stop and they'll go, yeah, man, that's pretty messed up, man. Yeah, I have to admit that's pretty wrong, but at least he ain't a Democrat, because they've just been taught, they've been taught that we're so evil that it's like, it's one of the hardest barriers to get over with people. But yeah, it's literally just, to me, they just go right hand in hand right here in Tennessee and Kentucky, right where I'm at. It's just the religion and the politics are one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, it's like my dad's side of the family was Lutheran. My mom's side of the family was like Methodist and Episcopalian. And to this day, I don't know what the hell any of that means.
Yeah.
But, my dad's side of the family was farmers. And, they had their local, kind of stereotypical local rural Lutheran church. My grandma taught Sunday school and she was in the choir, and my grandpa was a deacon in the church. And so when we were up, because my brother and I, we used to basically spend our summers at the farm. And so we would go to church with them on Sundays, and we'd go to Sunday school, and then there'd be the church service, and then in the basement afterwards, it'd be just like a huge potluck, and people would just hang out for a couple hours. And looking back, the thing that I appreciated the most about that experience was that the emphasis was on community. It was a rural area. There was a lot of distance between people's homes, and it's like there was such a community aspect of it to get together every Sunday. We'd see all of our cousins, and you'd see all the other farmers and their families, and it was such a social aspect to it. There wasn't any of that kind of like fire and brimstone kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I never heard anybody ever say a word about politics in that church, ever.
Wow.
But so it's like, it's always interesting to me, to have these kinds of conversations with people who grew up in different environments. And,
yeah.
And it's just, I don't know if it's just a cognitive dissonance thing or whatever, but it's like, I hear so many stories. Just what you told me about how your mom would get treated because she's a Democrat. And, it strikes me that over the last 40 or 50 years, since evangelicals came together with Reagan, the religious right, and really partnered up, Republicans and evangelicals, it just seems to me that like so much of what they consider to be their religious practice or how they behave out in the world as Christians is just so completely contrary to anything that Jesus Christ ever taught.
Exactly. Yeah. And I grew up in a Pentecostal church, which was, talking like hellfire and brimstone kind of sermons, and people spoke in tongues. If you ever saw the Blues Brothers where they're like walking and flipping on the backs of the pews, I'm not really exaggerating. That's just how it was.
Yeah.
And then later on, when I was a teenager, I went to the Baptist church, and I met a minister from my hometown, and his family was good friends with our family. And I will say this about the guy, man, he's very well read. He's very smart. I don't think he's an idiot by any means, but he just, but I remember back when I was growing up, he always preached a lot about, false prophets. He would always preach about people that would come along and would trick Christians and all this, And so when Trump started, I quit going to church back when I was like, 20-year-old. So around then I stopped going. And when Trump came along, I hadn't listened to this guy in years. And I was thinking, well, he used to always preach against false prophets and people that would use Christianity to their gain and things like that. I thought, surely he's not buying into this. And lo and behold, he has, and he's like full blown in the MAGA cult. And it's just like, and again, I don't think he's a dumb guy. I really don't. I think he's very well read and he knows his book for sure. But it's just baffling to me that he can't see through it. And And it was very disappointing because he was one of those people that I kind of held out hope that like maybe this will be the guy that will say, no, I ain't buying this, you know?
Yeah. And I think it, to me, in my mind anyway, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that it boils down to that fundamental principle of good versus evil.
Yeah.
And if that's the foundation, and you've been raised to just believe that one side is evil,
yeah,
and that's how you've been educated and socialized and for your entire life, that's your foundation, man.
Yeah.
I don't know how you break away from that. And
yeah, I know.
And I just saw this morning. I saw a TikTok from a guy who was trying to explain some of this stuff, and he was kind of putting it in terms of, he was like, one of the ways that Trump has kind of taken advantage of this, because I don't think Trump invented these people. I think he's just taking advantage of some weaknesses that he's seen in human nature on the right. And he was like, he's like, all these evangelicals, it's like they're Christians and, Jesus is their savior, but a lot of them really don't like Jesus as a person. And they see Trump and it's like, they see, Jesus was poor and Trump is a billionaire, and Jesus was weak and Trump is a bully. And so it's like they've just projected all of that onto Trump and made him their new Jesus.
Yeah, they really have, man. And they, I really believe that they admire Trump more. I mean, I do. They wouldn't, they would not like Jesus if he was here today preaching the message that he preached. That's the one thing.
A brown-skinned immigrant refugee.
Yeah, I mean, there you go.
With long hair.
Yeah, that right there would disqualify him before you even got started. But I see a lot of creators on TikTok and YouTube, different places, like Mr. Global, for example. I've heard him talk about being independent, and I've always just came right out and said, "Hey, I'm on the left. I'm over here on the left." And I think the reason I say that, man, is because where I was raised and there's really no room to be in the middle where I'm at. You know what I mean? Because they're so hardcore on the right. As I was listening to you talk about going to church, and you're talking about, hey, it never came up. It was just about community. I was sitting in the back of my mind going, if I'd have been raised up like that, then I definitely would have probably been more likely to say, I'm independent. I don't want to be aligned with either party. But where I'm at, it's like that extremism is so loud where that I'm at that it's almost like, okay, I got no choice but to be on the opposite side, because it's like it's hard to find middle ground in this part of the world.
Yeah, and it's like I still have a ton of family back in Ohio, so I see some of it a little bit when I go back to Ohio, but not much. And it's like I joke that because even though it's like I live in the Bay Area. I mean, I lived in San Francisco for over 20 years. Now I just live right across the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin County. And, my politics are very far to the left, and I live in the Bay Area, but I'm also a gun owner. I believe in the Second Amendment,
Yeah, me too.
And, I believe in the Second Amendment the way it's written.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
not the way it's been interpreted, I tell people it's like really the only time I have to deal with Trump supporters is when I go into the Central Valley, like an hour and a half, 2 hours away, when I go buy ammunition.
Yeah. Yeah, when you brought that up, the reason I was looking to the side, I actually got a book about the Second Amendment. I started reading it. I've been meaning to go back and finish it. I got a book that I saw you reading about the Second Amendment, and it was a good book. Yes, really good, and laid out how that it's been misinterpreted over the years. That's another one. Again, like I said earlier, people around here just brought up hunting and using guns, and they think the Democrats are coming for them, and. I've always, the one glaring thing that always stood out to me about that was a well-regulated militia being necessary. It's like kind of like right out of the gate. It's sort of, I'm like, man.
The first four words, man.
Yeah.
Well-regulated militia. It's how do you skip over that?
Exactly. And I'm like, Bubba and Cletus up in some holler somewhere here in Tennessee is not a well-regulated militia.
Right. Or the guys who were in Western North Carolina earlier this week who were hunting FEMA.
Yeah.
That's not a well-regulated militia.
I know. But yeah,
it's just, well, and it's so crazy because, the gun thing seems to just really go hand in hand with the religious apocalyptic good versus evil thing as well.
Yeah.
And I think I haven't watched it yet, but somebody was telling me that Rachel Maddow did a segment on Monday about this church. I think they're in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure. It's like the Church of the Iron Rod of Freedom is the name of their church, and they all carry AR-15s. That's their Iron Rod of Freedom.
Oh, man.
Everybody goes to church with their AR-15, and the guy who's the pastor, the preacher, or whatever, he's up there on the pulpit, with a gold-plated AR-15 while he's giving a sermon.
Wow. I'm surprised
and
that
he wears a crown. He wears a crown made of bullets.
Dang.
It's just like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, I know. Like, yeah, but that may catch on in these parts, man. I can see it. I can see it happening.
Yeah.
It's
well, I think the reason why she was talking about them, and I had read something about this. I had talked about it on one of my podcasts last week. Is that Mike Flynn, the disgraced former general who was Trump's national security advisor and then lied to the FBI and got indicted and all of that stuff. And he's gone full QAnon, and he was the featured speaker at an event at that church last week.
wow.
And he was just talking. He was like, when Trump gets reelected, he basically said, we're going to start executing people. And the crowd went crazy. They thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the hardest thing, and when I say what I'm about to say, and when I say it on TikTok, I always couch it in the following. I'm like, I am a heterosexual, cisgendered white man with a law degree. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. I have every privilege that this country affords except for generational wealth. Yeah. That having been said,
Yeah.
It's like, especially since Kamala came in to the campaign, Donald Trump's campaign has been explicitly racist, misogynistic, bigoted, transphobic, and authoritarian, and he's just campaigning on punishment, vengeance, retribution, and using the military against people on the left.
Yeah.
And 50% of the electorate is like, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want that. I want those things.
Yeah.
And it's like
scary.
In 2016, there was so much made out of, people saying, well, they had economic anxiety. They're not really racist. They just voted for him for his policies. That's out the window now.
Oh, yeah.
It's explicit.
Yes, it is.
It's explicit, and half of the electorate wants that. And I'm just sitting here going, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
How is this country? And, living out in the Bay Area, it's like I have a lot of friends who don't look like me. Black and brown and LGBTQ and immigrants and everything you can imagine, Native American, First Nations. And when I say things like that to them, they just point at me and laugh. They're like, where the hell you been for 400 years?
Yeah, I imagine so. It's funny too, man. It's funny too, man, how that I see people in my part of the world. I got family members that think this. They listen to all this rhetoric that Trump's doing, and they still go, he's just saying that to get elected. He don't really mean that. He would never do that. And I'm like, but okay, let's just go ahead and say that's what's going on. Let's just go ahead and say, for the sake of the argument, that that's what's going on. He's learned that none of these things are deal breakers for you. Right. He's said these things, even if he didn't have an intention of doing it, he has to now say to himself, well, hey, you know what? I said I would stick the military on people, and I've still got voters lined up to vote for me. So they're,
yeah.
I don't understand how that any reasonable person at this point in the game can still be there. And you made a great point. The people back in 2016, they could say, well, and a lot of people can say, well, they might have wanted to try something new. He was a new face in politics. He was a popular face, someone that we all knew who he was. And it was like, well, let's give this businessman a shot at it. But we're way past that. I don't feel like this is. I have a lot of people say to me that this is like 2016, and I don't think so. I don't think
Not
this
at
race
all.
is. I don't think this is at all like 2016, because now we know exactly who Donald Trump is, and we know what he did while he was in office and what he's done since. And man, it really baffles me. I think I do videos every day just to try to, stay sane. It's almost like me going to therapy. It's just making my videos, trying to talk my way through it and being like, how did we get here where people are okay with this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I saw an image, must have been on Facebook or something. Somebody had taken a picture of the front of somebody's house, and parked in the driveway was a police cruiser. This was the home of a police officer. On the back window of the police cruiser was a sticker or a decal of Jesus on the cross. And in the front yard was a sign that said, "I'm voting for the felon." And I'm like, that's it in a nutshell right there, man. It's like any rational, reasonable person looks at that and is like, what the hell? What is that?
Yeah.
I mean, just to see police officers or people in law enforcement supporting Trump, knowing what Trump did at the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah.
2 police officers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, man. One thing though that gives me a little bit of hope is around here, I'm not seeing as many signs this go around as I did in 2016. I saw less in 2020, but I still saw some. But now I'm not seeing near as many. And there was a guy over across the line over in Kentucky. He had a booth set up on the side of the road just selling Trump merch, and I drove by that several times and really didn't even see anyone under his tent. And I remember back in 2016, people lined up at those to buy stuff. So I think it's one of two things. I think people in this part, I think a lot of them realizes now what it means to say you support him. I think there's the diehards that still are. Don't get me wrong, I've still seen some, but I really feel like a lot of people, I just have a feeling that a lot of people are going to either stay home on election day and just sit it out, or B, they're gonna vote Kamala Harris and never tell anyone. Because I hope so anyway. I don't know how you're feeling about the election as far as whether she's going to win or not, but I'm not seeing there's still the loyals and the diehards. Don't get me wrong, that are still hanging right there with him, but I'm just not seeing that. I'm not seeing that energy around him in this part of the world that I did back in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, how I feel right now. And I've been getting in trouble a lot on TikTok from people on the left, which I spent the whole summer doing that when I was like, Joe Biden needs to drop out.
Yeah.
I got pretty savagely attacked for saying those things out loud. I'm seeing a different kind of cognitive dissonance, I think, on the left. Where everybody's like, you can't pay attention to any of the polls at all. And I'm like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, it's going to be a massive blue wave of all of these, secret Harris voters, and women are going to turn out in numbers we've never seen, which I think that's true with women because of the abortion issue and healthcare and things like that. But it's way closer than I'm comfortable. I think that Kamala Harris, I'm scared of another 2016 scenario. I think Kamala Harris is going to win the popular vote easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm worried about the Electoral College and the swing states. They're way too close for my comfort.
Yeah.
They are closer than they were in 2016 or 2020. Mm-hmm. And, and I talk to people a lot about 2020. I'm like, look, Biden was up by 7 points on election day. There was never a point in that election where he trailed Donald Trump in nationwide polls. Yeah. There was never a period of time in the 2020 election when Joe Biden trailed Donald Trump in the 6 or 7 swing states that he ended up winning. And, it's like, and people say, but he won by 7 million more votes. I'm like, yeah, in the popular vote, it's like 5 million of those votes came from California. 2 million of those votes came from New York. So they're irrelevant in the context of the Electoral College.
Yeah.
But that election was decided by less than 45,000 votes across 3 states, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia, in an election where over 150 million votes were cast.
Yeah.
was decided by less than 45,000 votes because of the Electoral College.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about that kind of a scenario. And, you know, I mean, put it this way. It's like, it's all going to come down to Pennsylvania. I think whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win the election.
Yeah.
And the way Pennsylvania counts their ballots, we're not going to know the result in Pennsylvania for 4 or 5 days after Election Day.
Yeah.
And that's built in by Republicans in the state legislature in Pennsylvania. And, you know, Donald Trump has already said that he's on election night. Where I think I had it printed out here if I can find it. He's already said that he's like, you know, you gotta declare victory on election night. You gotta say there was fraud on election night. You gotta do those things right out of the gate. Otherwise the evil forces dig in and cover their tracks. And so he's going to do that again this year. He's going to do that again. He's going to declare victory on election night while votes are still being counted. He's going to say there was fraud. He's going to say it's been stolen from him. And he's going to go down that path all over again. And it'll be interesting this time to see who goes with him. You know, I have a lot of criticisms of Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, for how he's handled the prosecutions of Trump and his inner circle. You know, but they've gone after the people who went inside the Capitol, you know, right out of the gate, man. And those people are going to prison. And you know, and it's people like you and me, man. You know, people in their 40s and 50s who, you know, were married, had families and jobs and houses and boats, and now they ended up going to prison for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a very, very strong deterrent over the last couple of years, and I hope it will be this time around too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh God, but it's gonna be a mess, and Trump's gonna make it a mess on purpose.
Yeah. He absolutely will. And I remember back in 2020, I had a good friend of mine. We were talking about that election going into it, and he was like, "Man, it's going to be a landslide, and Biden's going to win this one in a landslide." And he was so confident. And then midway through the election night, he texted me. He's like, "Dude, this is way too close." It was like, I, you know, that's something I think a lot about. I think Kamala can win this. I really do, but I think it's going to be. I think she will, but I think it's going to be close. And like you said, his only hope is to muddy the water and to create chaos. That's all he's got left. And I've never in my lifetime, man, seen a candidate who did not try in any way, shape, or form to bring anyone else into the fold. Like he's not reaching out to anyone.
So
it's so crazy to me.
That's a really interesting point, and because in 2016 his ceiling was 47%. Of the electorate. In 2020, his ceiling was 47% of the electorate. In 2024, he's at 47% of the electorate. Yeah. He doesn't. There aren't new people for him to add. Yeah, and which you know, his entire campaign, especially since Kamala has come in, has been to tear her down. Yeah, has been to try to convince people to not vote for her, as opposed to what you were just saying, bringing new people to him. Yeah. He's not doing anything to convince any new people to vote for him. He's just tearing everything he's just burning everything to the ground, man. Yeah. With racism and misogyny and bigotry against immigrants. And you know, again, it's like, I think that so much of his base, and I said this in a TikTok and then I had to go back and explain it. I just said, I think his base is absolutely terrified of 2042. And 2042 is the year that demographically white people are projected to become a minority in the United States of America. Yeah. And I think for a lot of white Americans, that's untenable for them. And what better way to change that trajectory than to elect a president who's going to immediately deport 15 million brown people. Yeah. That buys them a few more years in the majority. Yeah. And so again, it's just like I never envisioned, spending my mid-50s fighting against fascism and just this kind of overt racism. That's not exactly what I had on my bingo card,
Me either.
And again, my friends and people on TikTok who don't look like me, when I say things like that, they just point at me and laugh.
Yeah. Oh, they do me too. And I've
deservedly so,
Yeah, and I've shared stories with black friends of mine about just run-ins with the police that I've had, getting pulled over and how it went for me or whatever. And I tell them my stories, and they sit there with their jaw on the floor, like, "You got out of that? They let you go? You walked away from that? And then I hear their stories, and I'm like, wait a minute, you went through all of that over that simple little traffic violation? I mean, man, I'm not here to flex or anything, but there's been plenty of times that I, by all means, should not have been let go. I'll just own it. And I was.
Same.
And so when you really, what I try to tell people in my part of the world too, is if you'll get out there and talk with other people and learn about what they go through, I don't think people in my parts realize how good they got it, as far as they're not persecuted on the level. But Trump has created this, and like you said, these people were always here. He just capitalized on it, but they believe they're the ones being persecuted. They believe their life came after, and I'm like, you're not. It's not happening to you, but in their world it is, and in their mind it is.
It cracks me up when I hear or see people on TikTok saying that there's no group in the United States of America that is more persecuted or discriminated against in 2024 than straight white Christian men.
Yeah.
And they say it with their full chest, man.
Oh, yeah. They believe it.
They mean it.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And it's also so funny. That's like, they're the fuck your feelings crowd, and facts don't care about feelings, when it's like everything about how they're deciding to vote is based on emotion. Every single thing.
It is.
Facts have absolutely nothing to do with it at all. And it's like, I saw some interviews with some people who came out of that Trump rally. I think it was Monday night. His town hall, where he just stopped taking questions and stood up on stage, and they just listened to music for 40 minutes, and he stood there dancing and swaying to the music for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And anybody who chews their food with their mouth closed is looking at that going, he's sundowning on live television. He's sundowning. He's not competent. And they were interviewing some people who came out, some of his supporters, and they were like, that was amazing. That was the best. That was the greatest. We were just hanging out with Trump, listening to music. It was fantastic. It was just so great and amazing and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, what the fuck, man?
Man, I have a feeling, I watched that and I just couldn't believe I was seeing it, but I have a feeling that if you and I went to a Kamala Harris rally, and let's say we were standing there watching her, and let's say she decided to take some questions, and we're standing there, and then all of a sudden she said, hey, everybody, let's just dance. I don't think you and I would hang out for 40 minutes watching her dance. I really don't.
Or if Joe Biden had done that.
Oh, yeah.
If he had just stood there on stage, just like looking around, listening to music, looking lost.
Yeah.
That would have been that would have been the only thing that the media would have talked about for weeks.
Oh yeah, it would have been the number one story for weeks to come. I don't think that they've not covered that at all like they should either. Trump has had so many massive gaffes along the way that they've not even really dove in and covered all those things that he's done and said. But just the whole rambling on about Hannibal Lecter and the battery and the shark, and then he's tried to say now that that's all a weave. It's all part of this big story he's telling, and he's weaving it together. And I'm laughing out loud when I hear him say those things. I'm like, really, how can people sit back and buy that, at this point in the game?
Well, and it's not like he's going to lose this election and then these people are going to snap out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going to be like, I guess I was wrong.
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. I mean,
No.
we're going to go through all of this again in 4 years.
I've had so many people, I don't know if you've been asked this question, but I've had a lot of people ask me, like, well, what are you going to, like, what kind of content will you be making after Trump's gone? And I was like, he's not going to be gone for a long time. Like, we're still going to be dealing with this type of, even if he's no longer in the political arena, his influence is going to be, and there's going to be, I think there's going to be people come along that's going to try to imitate that. But for whatever reason, man, I've noticed that, like, for whatever reason, his gimmick, whatever you want to call it, it works for him. But when other people have tried it on,
translate, yeah.
Other people can't seem to pull it off, and so that's the only hope that I have, is that going forward there might be some people that might try to emulate that style, but I've not seen it really work for anyone else.
Well, which is why I think J.D. Vance is so dangerous.
Yes,
because he intellectualizes it.
Yes,
he couches it in terms of book smart kind of shit. And I went to Yale, and, he knows how to speak in such a way where dumb people look at him and go, oh, my God, that guy's incredibly smart.
Yeah. And,
whereas in reality, it's like, even though he's married and has 3 kids, he's basically an incel who's obsessed with women who are capable of having children but have chosen not to. Yeah. I've never met another human being who is more obsessed with that than him.
I haven't either.
It's fucking creepy and weird.
It really is. And when I was watching, it really is. And when I was watching the debate with him and Walls, I was sitting there getting this feeling in my stomach, like, oh, okay, he what he's doing right here, he's saving his career. He's trying to save his career, and he's going to present this as, like you said, like I'm smart, I'm educated, people are going to fall for this. And I imagine once Trump loses, that's the direction he'll go. He'll kind of resort back to, well, I never really was a Trump guy, but and he's going to go back there. And then he worries me because there are people. Trump, as crazy as he is one thing, but I've always said if that ever fell into the hands of someone who could figure out how to capitalize on it and come off, like you said, looking intelligent to people. J.D. Vance is a guy that's in his 40s, I saw a meme the other day on Facebook that said, we'd be one heartbeat away from having J.D. Vance as president for life. And I was like, that's pretty scary when you stop and think about it.
Well, and I think it's not even that, because, pretty quickly after Trump picked J.D. Vance, I was like, oh, okay, I understand this. If Trump were to win, then Trump would become president, J.D. Vance would become vice president. They'd give Trump a year, and then they'd do the 25th Amendment on Trump and remove him and just install J.D. Vance as president for the remainder of Trump's term. Yeah. And then he could run as an incumbent. Yeah. If there were any more elections after that, who knows, Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I think that except for the hardcore base and a few elected Republicans, I think the majority of Republicans and elected Republicans in this country can't wait to be done with Donald Trump.
I agree. I do agree.
Yeah. All right. We are about out of time here. There were a couple other things that I wanted to ask you real quick. Is Marsha Blackburn up for re-election this year?
Yeah, and she's Gloria Johnson's running against her.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we're really hoping to pull that one out. Gloria's in the House, but she's running for Senate, and man, that would just be so good. Gloria, I've met Gloria several times, and she's such a good, down-to-earth person, man. That's exactly who we need speaking for us, and I would feel so much better.
A normal human being who cares about other people.
Yes, and she was a school teacher, retired school teacher. She's worked with special needs kids. She's survived a school shooting. There's just so many things, talking with her, and she's down there. She's came out to my gigs, and I've talked to her on breaks, and
that's
she's
awesome, dude.
She's just a great person, and so we're really pulling for her here in Tennessee. Marsha Blackburn is just embarrassing here. She really is.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And for everybody watching, I will put in the show notes all of Tennessee Brando's social media links. Please go follow him. I follow him on TikTok and YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel. It's been growing like crazy. And thanks again, man. I really appreciate
you, man.
Hopefully we can
soon.
do another one of these in like a month and everything will be fine.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll have to do another one for sure.
Or maybe like early February after we get past January 20th.
Yeah, yeah. I won't really feel. I'll be honest with you, man. I'm not going to breathe a sigh of relief till I see her sworn in, and then people's like, well, so you're going to be excited on election night? I'm like, no, because we're going to be in for a while. When I see her sworn
election
in,
night is just it's a speed bump for Trump.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Thanks again.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
you joining
Appreciate
me.
you.